Quick warning, spoilers ahead for every Spider-Man and Spider-Man related movie, including both Venom movies and Morbius. In the aftermath of No Way Home, it's an exciting time to be a Spider-Man fan. The multiverse is now firmly established. Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire have reprised their roles, leaving the door open for more. And from here, they can go in so many directions. Maybe a Sam Raimi-directed Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire, or an Amazing Spider-Man 3 with Andrew Garfield, maybe another crossover. All exciting prospects, but at the moment, we actually know very little about what's coming next. One place we can look for a clue is the SSU, or Sony's Spider-Man universe. That's the world containing Venom, Morbius, and as of Morbius's post-credits scene, Vulture. This is a separate world from Tom Holland's. I realize that can get confusing. MCU stands for Marvel Cinematic Universe, but with the introduction of the multiverse, the MCU now contains many universes. In a sense, you can consider the SSU just one of those universes. The only difference is that traveling to or from the SSU has a bit more red tape because it's owned by another company, Sony. So to keep things simple, when I say MCU, I'm talking about the specific world that Tom Holland's Spider-Man lives in. When I say SSU, I'm talking about the world that Venom and Morbius live in, the one Sony owns. And so far, Sony's world has been oddly Spider-Man free, but that may soon change. It's been hinted that in Venom's world, there is a Spider-Man. But who will that Spider-Man be? In this video, we'll tackle that question by looking at clues in the movies themselves, what's been said in interviews, possible leaks, and speculation based on what's most likely. In the movies themselves, there isn't a lot to go on. The Spider-Man references are a bit sloppy and sometimes contradictory. Our best bet is to focus on the behind the scenes and figure it out from there. I'm sure most of you know about the agreement between Marvel and Sony to share Spider-Man, but for those who don't, here's the 30-second explanation. Before Marvel had their own studio, and before they were owned by Disney, they licensed their characters to other studios to make movies based on them. In 1998, Sony licensed Spider-Man along with related characters like Venom, Morbius, Kraven the Hunter, Madam Web, and around 900 others. But after Amazing Spider-Man 2 disappointed and the MCU became the MCU, Spider-Man producer Amy Pascal went to Kevin Feige and basically asked, "Can you just tell us what to do?" And when he said, "No, just let us make the movie for you," she supposedly threw a sandwich at him, but ultimately did agree to the deal, because Feige clearly knows how to make movies that make money. The deal was that Marvel would put Spider-Man in the MCU, make the movie their own way, and share the profits with Sony. Everybody wins. Meanwhile, Sony still wants to make their own movies and make even more money, so they've been looking to those 900 other characters to base movies on them. Movies like Venom and Morbius. Thus, Sony's Spider-Man universe, or the SSU, was born. And the reason why these movies tend to focus on villains or anti-heroes is that when you remove Spider-Man from his cast of characters, you're mostly left with villains, like Venom. So in this universe of anti-heroes, are there any heroes? Namely, is there a Spider-Man? The question got pretty hilariously confusing when we started seeing trailers for Morbius. There's graffiti of Spider-Man on the wall, and it's the costume Tobey Maguire wore. But the word murderer is spray-painted over it, as if in response to the accusation that Tom Holland's Peter Parker murdered Mysterio. And the picture used for the graffiti is from the PS4 game. Okay, so someone over at Sony wanted to digitally insert a picture of Spider-Man and probably just grabbed one that looked good from their asset library. But check out the logo for the Daily Bugle. That's the same logo used in the Tobey Maguire movies. But this Oscorp logo is the one from Andrew Garfield's movies. So Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man exists in the SSU? Wait a minute, Adrian Toomes, aka Vulture, is in this movie? So is this the MCU with Tom Holland? By the time Morbius actually came out, Most of these references, including the Oscorp logo and the graffiti, were removed from the movie. The scene of tombs was also removed, but replaced with one where, for some reason, the spell at the end of No Way Home brought him into the SSU. Then he somehow constructed a new Vulture suit and seemingly recruited Morbius for the Sinister Six movie, which Sony has been trying to make for about a decade now. In fact, maybe that's where Vulture got his suit. Remember the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2 when the Gentleman walked through Oscorp, and behind him we saw Doc Ock tentacles, Vulture wings, and the Rhino suit? If Venom and Morbius are in the Amazing Spider-Man universe, maybe Harry Osborn hooked Adrian up with a new suit before this scene. So, does Spider-Man exist in the same universe as Morbius and Venom? Or to see Spider-Man, would these characters have to, No Way Home style, travel to another universe? In the text of the movies themselves, the answer is unclear. Toomes mentioned Spider-Man to Morbius in that post-credit scene. Of course, he's talking about the MCU Spider-Man, but Morbius does seem interested, which would imply familiarity with some version of Spider-Man. Otherwise, you'd expect his response would be less intriguing and more, what the hell is a Spider-Man? Daniel Espinosa, director of Morbius, was asked about this in an interview. It was pointed out that Morbius never met Spider-Man in the movie, so why would he be intrigued by Vulture's offer? Daniel responded, "Oh, exactly. I think that's more one of those scenes that are made that when you have scenes before that in a movie comes along, that will explain that reposition." I think what he's trying to say is that in a sequel to Morbius, we'd have some scenes which take place between the end of Morbius and this post-credits scene, meaning Morbius and Spider-Man have likely interacted already by the time Vulture recruits him. Though it's still unclear, would Morbius have interacted with Vulture's Spider-Man, i.e. Tom Holland, in some universe-hopping shenanigans, or another Spider-Man, one native to Morbius and Venom's world? In the Let There Be Carnage post-credits scene, Venom clearly knows about Spider-Man too, but he also explains that symbiotes share a hive mind across the multiverse. So even if there is no Spider-Man in the SSU, Venom would still know about him. And even if you interpreted Venom's ramblings about 80 billion light years of hive knowledge across universes as just empty boasting to Eddie Brock, the writers of No Way Home confirmed the idea. Co-writer Chris McKenna explained, "The idea is that the symbiote has knowledge of other universes. Buried in his brain is some knowledge of that connection," referring to Venom's knowledge of Spider-Man. The fact is, the movies themselves don't tell us for sure if there is a Spider-Man in the SSU, and if there is, who that Spider-Man would be. What if you ask the filmmakers themselves? The most direct answer we got is from Daniel Espinosa during a Twitter Q&A. When asked, what universe does Morbius take place in, he answered, "Morbius lives in the same universe as Venom. This is the universe we saw Venom exit at the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage and return to at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home." When asked, is there a Spider-Man in Venom's universe, he answered, "Of course." And finally, as to which Spider-Man that is, he answered, "It is my understanding that audiences will discover the answer soon." So, what is going on here? Honestly, I think audiences are unsure because Sony has been unsure. That murderer graffiti, along with the casually included scene of Adrian Toomes, tells me that Sony didn't think too hard about continuity. At the time this trailer was released, I'd bet they were thinking, this movie falls far from home. Let's throw in some Spider-Man references so the movie feels at least MCU adjacent. But somewhere along the way, they realized or were informed that won't work. Feige has been pretty protective of MCU continuity. Although they share Spider-Man, Marvel is clearly in the driver's seat when handling Tom Holland's appearances. Venom and Morbius are a different story. Those are Sony's movies. Without strict oversight from Marvel, there's no way to ensure continuity between Sony and the mainline MCU movies. Even within their own company, Marvel has consolidated for a more singular vision. Television is no longer handled by another division, but is instead now within Feige's purview. So as an entirely separate company, I'm sure Marvel doesn't want Sony messing with their continuity. So while Morbius and Let There Be Carnage were delayed, Sony changed tactics and reworked their movies to ensure no confusion. The SSU is not the MCU. Tom Holland's Spider-Man lives in the MCU over here, while Venom and Morbius live in the SSU over there. So Vulture's scenes were reworked. He no longer just bumps into Morbius as shown in the trailer, but is instead transported from one world to another, using the effects from No Way Home. And honestly, it feels a little like Feige isn't too excited to have them mix. It's hard to ignore the fact that Venom finally crossed over to the MCU, but the closest he got to Spider-Man was licking him on a TV screen, and his appearances were relegated to post-credit scenes. Now, maybe that'll change in the future if Sony does a better job with quality control. Anyway, the end result of all this is that there is no master plan. When Sony made their first Venom movie, they didn't conceive of a separate universe, nor did they decide on which Spider-Man resides within it. They're probably figuring that out now, or recently did and just haven't shared it publicly yet. That would explain why anytime they're asked about Venom meeting Spider-Man over the years, their answers have been so not straightforward. Anyway, at least according to Daniel Espinosa, we will be meeting a Spider-Man in the SSU soon. So, who's it going to be? Well, in the world of Hollywood, the answer can always be found by following the money. Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home both did great at the box office. But adding Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and their associated villains to the mix made No Way Home domestically the third highest grossing movie of all time. I have no doubt that if Tobey and Andrew are willing, they will be back in some way, shape, or form. Could one of them be the Spider-Man of the SSU? Tobey Maguire would be an odd choice, considering his world already had an Eddie Brock and a Venom, even if the symbiote never officially adopted that name on screen in Spider-Man 3. Now, not every company needs to be as stringent with continuity as Marvel Studios, but that's what the Marvel audience is getting used to, and it seems Sony is trying to move in that direction. So Tobey may show up in a Sony or Marvel movie, but I doubt he'll be introduced as the native Spider-Man of the SSU. Also, going back to the whole money thing, Andrew Garfield, age 38, is almost 10 years younger than Tobey Maguire at 47. So if Sony wants a Spider-Man that can stick around for a little while for multiple appearances, Andrew Garfield might be a better choice. Plus, his continuity avoids those obvious contradictions with Venom. A few years ago, I'm sure Sony's first pick for a Spider-Man in their world would be Tom Holland. He's the current Spider-Man everyone is familiar with, so if they announce a Venom vs. Spider-Man movie, Holland is the guy they'd want. But that opens the door to those MCU continuity complexities and may bump into Feige's plans. Andrew Garfield would let Sony have their cake and eat it too. They get an established Spider-Man for whom there's a ton of renewed interest after No Way Home, but they don't have to worry about messing with the MCU at all. It's a no-brainer. Fans want it, it would make tons of money. In the past, Sony and Marvel might have avoided this to avoid the confusion of multiple Spider-Men swinging around, but we're now in an era where that's totally acceptable. Look at Into the Spider-Verse, No Way Home, Joker, and the Batman. Audiences are getting used to multiple iterations of the same character coexisting. The only question is, does Andrew Garfield want to come back? Here's what he said in interviews. Back in January of this year, shortly after No Way Home's release, he said, yes, definitely open to something if it felt right. He added, if there was an opportunity to step back in and tell more of that story, I would have to feel very sure and certain in myself. Then in February, he told Variety, no plans, that's the truth. Then added, everyone's going to call me a liar for the rest of my life. I'm the boy who cried wolf, referencing how many times he denied his role in No Way Home. In March, he continued a similar line with The Hollywood Reporter, saying,
no update from me. No one's going to believe anything I say ever again. That's my problem.
To be clear about these quotes, even if he is telling the truth, that doesn't mean he won't be Spider-Man again. It just means that there are no plans for it right now. He already said he'd be interested if the story's right, and I don't think we have any reason to believe that's changed. Finally, in April, he told Variety that he's taking a break from acting, saying, "I'm going to rest for a little bit, and I need to recalibrate and reconsider what I want to do next, and who I want to be, and just be a bit of a person for a while." Sort of like Peter throwing away his suit in Spider-Man 2. But we all remember how that went. Eventually, heroes always realize they're needed and make their comeback. So even if Andrew had no updates in February or March and is now taking an acting break, I see nothing to suggest he can't show up as the SSU's Spider-Man down the line. Sony just needs to make him an acceptable offer. And I see two factors at play: money and story. On the money front, after No Way Home's box office record, I have no doubt Sony can write a paycheck big enough to catch Garfield's attention. It would clearly be a worthwhile investment for them. He could potentially headline in Amazing Spider-Man 3, which would probably outperform whatever it would have done if it actually came out back in 2016 or so. Plus, his presence in the SSU would elevate the stature of that entire universe. He could make appearances in Madam Web, Kraven the Hunter, and whatever else they have in their pipeline. His involvement has the potential to boost the performance of every SSU movie, at least for a little while. That's especially true if Sony and Marvel work out another No Way Home style crossover, which could once again reinvigorate interest in Garfield's take on the character. Now, that investment may not pay off if Sony can't get a handle on quality control. The reception on Morbius was so bad, it's become a meme. But not in a so bad it's good kind of way, which I guess is what Sony thought was happening, considering their failed attempt to re-release it. Right now, Sony has 3 Spider-Man related movies scheduled for release: Kraven the Hunter, Madam Web, and El Muerto. If these are Morbius-level movies, I think at a certain point audiences will start to realize, hey, if we see in association with Marvel before a movie starts, instead of Marvel Studios, we're in for a bad time, whether or not it features an appearance from Andrew Garfield. Which brings us to our second point, story. I have no doubt Sony could back a truck full of money into Andrew Garfield's driveway, and if that isn't enough, 2 trucks. But he's been in a lot of critically acclaimed films and seems to be fairly discerning with the roles he takes. So he may be true to his word when he says he'll only come back for the right story. Meaning, if they just reassemble the writers and director from Morbius and offer Andrew Garfield a co-starring role in Morbius vs. The Amazing Spider-Man, I think he'll turn them down. To get him back, I think it'll take those trucks of money plus the right talent behind the camera with the right story pitch. That's obviously doable, but Sony did just re-release Morbius, which maybe shows not the best judgment. So they might need to do a little soul-searching while Andrew is on his acting break. With Sony remaining silent on all of this for now, it's hard to find anything public to corroborate all this. But there are at least some scraps we can look at. My Time to Shine Hello is a Twitter account from someone who claims to be a Marvel insider. They've put out many Marvel leaks, some of which panned out and some of which didn't. When it comes to these sorts of accounts, it's hard to judge credibility. Just because something they said turned out wrong doesn't mean they were wrong. It could very well be that what they said was accurate at the time, and since then, the studio just changed course. But this particular user is usually considered one of the more credible. All that being said, here's some of what they posted after No Way Home. Not only Andrew, they want Emma Stone back as well. Not the last we'll see of Tobey and Andrew. Andrew Garfield could actually come back for multiple projects. Andrew is coming back. And finally, Andrew Garfield will get everything he wants. That last one sounds right to me. When a movie cracks the top 5 all-time highest-grossing movies of all time, I believe a studio will do whatever it takes to recreate even a fraction of that success. Even without a tweet from a supposed insider, I would believe this 100%. In the negotiations that maybe already happened, are happening, or will happen, the sky's the limit for Andrew Garfield. He can ask for more money, He can insist on certain talent behind the camera, and maybe, unlike in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 days, he now has the leverage to insist on prioritizing story over franchise building. If he does come back, what would it actually look like? Would he show up for cameos or supporting roles in one of Sony's traditional anti-hero-led movies? Or would they go all the way with an Amazing Spider-Man 3? I have a hard time seeing that happen. As much as audiences are comfortable with more than one Spider-Man, I gotta think Sony releasing their own solo Spider-Man movie while Marvel does the same has gotta make Kevin Feige uncomfortable. But we're in pretty uncharted territory right now. Sony and Marvel might be confident that audiences will understand the difference between Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man 3 and Tom Holland's Spider-Man Brand New Day? Who knows what it'll be called, but I assume they'll drop the home angle for the next one, and scrolling through a list of Spider-Man arcs, this one had a nice ring to it, and captures the idea of the soft reboot, which I'm expecting after the way No Way Home ended. Though if they're not quite ready for that yet, they could slow roll it by featuring Andrew Garfield in another movie first, like, for example, Sinister Six. It feels like that's what Morbius was setting up for in the post-credits, and if it turns out they're residing in Andrew Garfield's universe, that kind of works out perfectly. Back in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 days, filmmaker Drew Goddard was attached to direct Sinister Six, and Andrew Garfield seems impressed with his vision. In 2021, he told Collider, "I've got to say, because I love Drew so much, and I love Cabin in the Woods, and the other stuff he's made, we just got on like a house on fire. I loved his vision. He's so unique and odd and off-kilter and unconventional in his creative choices." And as recently as 2018, Amy Pascal said she'd love to resurrect that movie with Goddard back in the director's chair. If she could do that, it sounds like it could satisfy Garfield from a story and a talent standpoint. Then, all they'd need is that truckload of money. To conclude, I think Sony wants Andrew Garfield back as their Spider-Man, and it's just a matter of whether or not he'll say yes. And if I had a truckload of money to bet, I'd put it on yes. I think they'll work something out. But if not, what's their plan B? I'm guessing Sony would give us a new, non-Peter Parker Spider-Man. I think it's a given that at some point, we'll see a live-action iteration of another Spider-Person plucked from the comics. In fact, Sony currently has an Amazon Prime series in production based on Silk. In the comics, Cindy Moon, aka Silk, is a character who was bitten by the same spider as Peter. Also, Olivia Wilde signed on with Sony to direct a female-centric Marvel movie back in August 2020, which is rumored to feature Spider-Woman. And of course, since the introduction of his uncle, Aaron Davis, in Homecoming, fans have been eagerly awaiting the introduction of Miles Morales, though the MCU may try to lay claim to him before Sony can, in live action anyway. Or maybe if they can't get Andrew Garfield back, they can fulfill another fan demand by bringing Emma Stone back to play a live-action Spider-Gwen. Maybe it's revealed that the SSU is an alternate reality where Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker is the one who died, while Gwen Stacy lived on as Spider-Gwen. With the multiverse now commonly accepted, the options are pretty limitless. The big caveat to all this is that none of us are privy to the details of Sony and Marvel's arrangement. For all we know, one term of their agreement for having Tom Holland in the MCU is that Sony will hold off on introducing their own Peter Parker. But one way or another, it seems that at some point, they'll want to introduce their own Spider-Man. Like I said, it's an amazing time to be a Spider-Man fan. I'm excited to see where Marvel and Sony go in their separate, sometimes overlapping universes, though I am hoping for more No Way Homes and less Morbiuses. But we'll see. I think we can wrap it up there. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. Also, make sure to let me know in the comments who you think the SSU's Spider-Man will be and what you'd like to see next for the character. With that, thank you for watching and see you on the next One Take.